The documents I'm about to expose will reveal the most controversial and secretive political maneuver in modern Canadian history. Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister, is rushing through a radical transformation plan that has Conservative MPs absolutely livid, and even some Liberal members questioning his motives. What I've uncovered isn't just another policy disagreement. It's a complete restructuring of how Canada operates, being implemented at breakneck speed without proper parliamentary oversight. The Conservative Party is calling it the biggest constitutional crisis since Confederation, and after you see what Carney is actually trying to push through, you'll understand why even his own party members are secretly plotting to remove him from power. This story goes deeper than you imagine, and the implications will shock you. Before we dive into this explosive revelation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the like button, because this is exactly the kind of content that gets suppressed by algorithms. The establishment doesn't want you to know what's really happening behind closed doors in Ottawa. Share this video with everyone you know, and let me know in the comments what you think about these shocking developments. Because what you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about Canadian politics. Let me start with the most damning evidence. Liberal MPs are literally voting to adopt the Reform Act, specifically to give themselves the power to remove Mark Carney as Prime Minister. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about elected members of Carney's own party who are so concerned about his secret agenda that they're preparing legal mechanisms to topple him from leadership. This isn't normal political disagreement. This is an internal revolt against a leader who's moving too fast and too secretly for even his own caucus to stomach. The Reform Act provision they're implementing would allow Liberal MPs to trigger a confidence vote to remove Carney without needing to wait for a traditional leadership review. The fact that they're doing this just weeks after he became Prime Minister tells you everything you need to know about how dangerous they believe his agenda actually is. These aren't conservative troublemakers or opposition critics. These are Liberal MPs who campaigned for Carney and now realize they may have made a terrible mistake. But what exactly is this secret project that has everyone so terrified? The answer lies in what Carney calls his Rapid Government Transformation Plan, a massive $225 billion spending package that would fundamentally restructure Canadian society. But here's the terrifying part. He's trying to implement this without proper parliamentary debate, without committee review, and without giving opposition parties adequate time to analyze the implications. The scale of what Carney is proposing is unprecedented. We're talking about $130 billion in new measures over just 4 years, combined with existing commitments that bring the total to nearly $250 billion in new federal debt. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire federal budget was just a few years ago. He's essentially doubling down on government spending at a time when Canadians are already struggling with inflation, housing costs, and economic uncertainty. The Conservative Party has labeled Carney's approach as sneaky and deceptive, and they have good reason. Carney has refused to fully disclose his business assets and potential conflicts of interest. Even after becoming Prime Minister, he submitted what he called a full and robust conflict of interest management plan to the Ethics Commissioner, but then turned around and claimed he has no conflicts of interest whatsoever. How can someone claim to have no conflicts when they just submitted a management plan for those very conflicts? The secrecy extends to his negotiations with the United States. Recent reports reveal that Carney has been conducting secret talks with President Trump about trade and security agreements. These aren't routine diplomatic discussions. These are fundamental negotiations about Canada's future that are happening completely outside of parliamentary oversight. Conservative MPs are furious that such critical decisions are being made in secret meetings without any input from elected representatives. What makes this even more concerning is the speed at which Carney is moving. Traditional government policy development involves extensive consultation, committee hearings, parliamentary debate, and public input. Carney is bypassing all of these democratic safeguards in the name of urgency. He's claiming that Canada faces the biggest crisis of our lifetimes, and that extraordinary measures are necessary. But critics argue that he's using manufactured urgency to push through policies that would never survive normal democratic scrutiny. The Conservative Party's response has been withering. They've accused Carney of being just like Justin Liberal, a reference to Justin Trudeau's controversial governing style. But their criticism goes deeper than partisan politics. They're arguing that Carney's approach represents a fundamental attack on parliamentary democracy and the Westminster system of government that Canada has operated under for over 150 years. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has started calling him Carbon Tax Carney and has accused him of lying about his business connections. These aren't just political nicknames. They're part of a broader strategy to expose what Conservatives see as Carney's pattern of deception and secrecy. The fact that they're willing to make such direct accusations suggests they believe they have evidence that could seriously damage Carney's credibility. The immigration component of Carney's secret project is particularly controversial. His plan includes capping immigration until it can be returned to its sustainable pre-pandemic trend, which sounds reasonable on the surface. But the details reveal a much more radical approach that would fundamentally alter Canada's immigration system without proper consultation with provinces, municipalities, or immigrant communities themselves. What's most alarming is how Carney is framing these changes. He's positioning his immigration cap as a correction to previous policies, but critics argue that he's actually implementing a dramatic shift in Canadian immigration policy without a mandate from voters. Remember, Carney became Prime Minister through a leadership convention, not a general election. He's never actually faced Canadian voters as a party leader, yet he's implementing policies that would typically require a clear electoral mandate. The housing crisis component of his plan is equally problematic. Carney is promising to address Canada's housing shortage, but his approach involves massive government intervention in housing markets that economists warn could actually make the problem worse. He's talking about using federal powers to override municipal zoning laws and provincial jurisdiction in ways that could trigger constitutional challenges. The economic implications of Carney's secret project are staggering. His plan to tax what? Canada exports and subsidize what we import, as critics have characterized his approach, goes against every principle of sound economic policy. Canada's economy is built on resource exports and manufacturing. Carney's plan would essentially penalize the very industries that drive Canadian prosperity while subsidizing imports that compete with Canadian businesses. The speed at which he's moving these policies through has alarmed even neutral observers. Government transformation of this magnitude typically takes years of careful planning and consultation. Carney is trying to implement changes in months that would normally require multiple parliamentary sessions and extensive public debate. The fact that he's doing this while Parliament is in a minority situation makes it even more problematic. The Conservative Party has identified several specific areas where they believe Carney is overstepping his authority. His plans to suspend certain regulatory processes, defer corporate tax payments, and increase regional unemployment benefits all require legislative approval that he's trying to obtain through rushed procedures that don't allow for proper scrutiny. What's particularly concerning is how Carney is using his background as a former Bank of England governor and Federal Reserve chair to justify these extraordinary measures. He's essentially arguing that his international experience gives him unique insight into what Canada needs, but critics point out that he's been out of the country for most of the past decade and may not understand current Canadian realities. The secrecy surrounding his business interests adds another layer of concern. Carney made millions working for Brookfield Asset Management, a company that would directly benefit from many of the infrastructure and energy policies he's now proposing. The fact that he's refusing to provide full disclosure of these relationships, while pushing through policies that could enrich his former employers, raises serious ethical questions. The Conservative Party has also highlighted inconsistencies in Carney's statements about his role at Brookfield. He claimed he wasn't involved in the company's decision to move its headquarters from Canada to the United States, but corporate records suggest otherwise. These kinds of contradictions are fueling Conservative arguments that Carney can't be trusted to be honest about his motivations and connections. The international context makes Carney's secret project even more troubling. He's trying to fundamentally restructure Canada's economy and government at a time when the country faces unprecedented challenges from Trump's America, China's growing influence, and global economic uncertainty. Making such dramatic changes without proper democratic oversight could leave Canada vulnerable to external pressures and manipulation. The fact that Liberal MPs are preparing mechanisms to remove their own Prime Minister suggests that the internal opposition to Carney's project is much stronger than what's visible publicly. These MPs were elected on platforms that didn't include the radical changes Carney is now proposing. They're facing the difficult choice between loyalty to their party leader and loyalty to the voters who elected them on different promises. The Conservative response has been to position themselves as the defenders of democratic norms and parliamentary tradition. They're arguing that regardless of whether you agree with Carney's policies, the way he's implementing them represents a dangerous precedent that could undermine Canadian democracy. This isn't just about opposing liberal policies. It's about opposing a governing style that bypasses democratic safeguards. The timing of Carney's push is also suspicious. He's trying to implement these changes during what should be a honeymoon period for a new prime minister, when opposition parties are typically more willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt. The fact that he's facing such strong resistance so early in his tenure suggests that the scope of his plans is far more radical than what he revealed during the leadership campaign. The media response has been mixed, with some outlets praising Carney's bold vision while others question his methods. What's notable is how quickly the narrative has shifted from celebrating Canada's new experienced prime minister to questioning his democratic credentials. This suggests that the concerns about his secret project are resonating beyond partisan political circles. The implications for Canada's federal system are profound. Carney's approach to implementing his project involves unprecedented federal intervention in areas of provincial jurisdiction. His plans for housing, immigration, and economic development all require cooperation from provinces that haven't agreed to the changes he's proposing. This could trigger a constitutional crisis that makes the unity issues of the past look minor by comparison. The international community is also watching closely. Carney's reputation as a respected international financial figure is at stake. If his approach to governing Canada is seen as undemocratic or reckless, it could damage his credibility on the world stage and, by extension, Canada's international standing. What makes this story so compelling is how it reveals the gap between public perception and political reality. Most Canadians see Mark Carney as a competent technocrat who will bring stability and expertise to government, but the behind-the-scenes reality shows a leader who is willing to bypass democratic norms and rush through radical changes without proper consultation or oversight. The Conservative Party's strategy of calling him Carbon Tax Carney and linking him to Justin Trudeau's controversial legacy is designed to undermine his credibility before his policies become entrenched. They're arguing that Carney represents continuity with the worst aspects of Liberal governance while adding new levels of secrecy and overreach. The fact that this is happening during a minority government situation makes it even more remarkable. Typically, minority governments have to be more collaborative and transparent because they can't take parliamentary approval for granted. Carney seems to be operating as if he has a majority mandate when he actually needs to work with opposition parties to pass legislation. The ultimate question is whether Carney's secret project will survive the growing opposition from all sides. With his own MPs preparing to potentially remove him, the Conservative Party mobilizing against his agenda, and the public beginning to question his methods, the next few months will be critical in determining whether this radical transformation of Canadian government can actually be implemented. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Carney succeeds in pushing through his secret project, it could fundamentally alter how Canada is governed for generations to come. If he fails, it could represent one of the shortest and most controversial prime ministerial tenures in Canadian history. Either way, the battle over Carney's secret project will define Canadian politics for years to come.